It was a bright, sunny day in the big harbor. All the tugboats were gathered around the dispatcher for the morning work meeting. "Theodore," said the dispatcher, "your job today is to bring Barrington barge to the oil refinery. He's been loaded with the big load of tubes." Theodore was excited. Pulling Barrington was lots of fun. "Yes, sir," said Theodore, and he set off for Barrington's dock. Theodore smiled. He swayed from side to side the way he did when he was especially happy. "This will be lots of fun," he told himself. When Theodore arrived at Barrington's dock, he whistled a friendly toot-toot to his friend. "Hello, Barrington," he called. "Hello, Theodore," Barrington exclaimed. "I'm all ready to go." Theodore got ready to button on to the barge, but he was so excited that he wasn't paying attention. Theodore bumped Barrington, and some of his tubes went spilling into the water. "Theodore!" cried Barrington. "You've knocked over my tubes!" "I'm sorry, Barrington," said Theodore. "Now I'm going to be late," said Barrington. Theodore felt badly about what he had done. I can help you pick them up," he said, trying to be helpful. "I don't want your help," Barrington said crossly. Well, Theodore couldn't think of anything to say, so he turned away and floated off to his next job. Theodore floated along very sadly. He was still feeling very bad about what had happened with Barrington. "I wonder if Barrington will still be my friend," he wondered to himself. But it wasn't long until he saw George and Emily bringing in a large container ship. Theodore was to help dock her. "Maybe I'll do a better job this time," Theodore thought to himself, and he quickly raced off to help his friends. When Theodore arrived at the ship, Emily piped up. "Hello, Theodore," she said. "Hurry round to the back," called George. "We really need you." Theodore hurried to the back of the ship and quickly buttoned on. But what he didn't realize was that his tow rope was worn and weak. As they approached the dock, George and Emily began to slow down. Theodore tried to keep the ship steady until his tow rope snapped. The back of the ship swerved furiously and smacked into the dock. "Ouch!" cried the ship. Theodore gasped in horror. Emily and George turned crossly to Theodore. "Theodore!" Emily shouted. "You've just caused an accident," George said angrily. Theodore felt awful. "I'm sorry," he said in a small voice. "The dispatcher always tells us to make sure our tow ropes are in good working order," said Emily. I could go fetch another tow rope and then help you dock the ship," said Theodore. "No!" shouted George. "We don't need your help," scowled Emily. Theodore didn't say anything, but then he thought to himself, "I wonder if George and Emily are still my friends." He floated sadly away. Theodore decided to visit Hank near the sandy beach. He thought maybe Hank could cheer him up. As he rounded the bend, he could see Hank cruising near the shore. Hank was looking for underwater treasures. There was already a small pile stacked up on the sand. "I can't wait to show everyone all the neat treasures I found," Hank said proudly. Theodore thought that looked like fun. "Hank," Theodore called as he rushed over, "may I look for things with you?" Hank could see Theodore was going too fast. "Slow down, Theodore," he called. But it was too late. Theodore stopped so quickly that he made a big wave that splashed up on the sand. All of Hank's treasures washed back into the water. "Theodore!" shouted Hank. "You've lost all my treasures!" Theodore felt horrible. "Sorry, Hank," Theodore said sadly. I can help you get them back." "I don't want your help," Hank said. Once again, Theodore didn't say a word. He just turned and floated sadly towards home. As Theodore drifted along, he thought about everything that had happened and how everyone had shouted at him for his mistakes. Barrington, Emily, George, and Hank are all angry with me. They must not love me anymore, he thought sadly. Theodore felt miserable. He wished there was a place he could be all alone and cry. Suddenly, there seemed like only one thing to do. I'm not going home, Theodore told himself. They would all be better off without me. I'll run away and find a new home. Theodore turned towards the great ocean dock. Then he fired his engine and set off out of the big harbor. Later that day, the other tugs were all back at the dock, all except for one. Where's Theodore? Asked the dispatcher. No one knew. I heard that the tubes were never delivered to the oil refinery, continued the dispatcher. He caused an accident with the container ship, said George. And he lost all my treasures, said Hank sadly. Did anyone try to talk to him? Asked the dispatcher. Well, no, said Emily. We all kind of shouted at him. We really weren't nice to him, Hank said. And he didn't mean to do all those things, replied George. Well, said the dispatcher, you all better go and look for him. And so the tugboats all set out to look for Theodore. Where could he be? Theodore was cruising along the coast looking for a new home. There must be somewhere that's just right for me, Theodore wondered. Just then, he saw a small cove up ahead. It was a little cold and a little dark, but it looked like just the right side for Theodore. This is perfect, Theodore thought. He quickly settled into the cove. Oh, this is nice, he thought to himself. A little cove all to myself. It's so nice and cozy here. I'm going to stay here forever and ever. Theodore was very pleased. Meanwhile, back at the great ocean dock, the tugboats were feeling very discouraged. They couldn't find Theodore anywhere, and it was getting dark. Oh, where could he be? Said Emily. Do you think something's happened to him? Asked George. Maybe it's because we shouted at him, Emily replied. What if Theodore's run away? Hank said sadly. We'll have to send Constance the Coast Guard to search for him, said the dispatcher, sounding very worried. The tugs knew that sending Constance to look for Theodore meant that this was now a very serious matter. I sure hope she'll be able to find Theodore, Emily said worriedly. Me too, Emily, said the dispatcher. Hank and George were hoping the same thing. It was dark by now. Theodore tried to settle into his new home, but he just couldn't. The waves made him rock this way and that. There were strange shadows that danced across the rocks. And worst of all, there wasn't even anyone around to share stories with. It wasn't like the great ocean dock at all. Suddenly, Theodore's new home didn't seem so wonderful after all. Oh, why did I ever run away from home? Theodore sighed. I miss the big harbor, and I miss my nice warm dock, and I really miss all my friends. He couldn't help but shed a small tear. Theodore wished he was back home. Just then, he noticed a very small light in the distance. It grew bigger and bigger. Theodore wasn't sure what it was at first. Then a voice followed. Theodore? Theodore, is that you? It was Constance, shining her big emergency searchlight. I'm in here, Theodore called softly. Whatever are you doing way out here? Asked Constance. I ran away from home, Theodore started to say, and I found this little cove, but it's not like home at all, and I want to go home. Constance could see the little tug looked very unhappy. Well, Constance said finally, the important thing is you're safe now. Everyone's very worried about you. I'll be very glad to take you back home. Thank you, Constance, said Theodore. He felt a little better already. The two set off back to the big harbor. By the time Theodore and Constance arrived back at the dock, it was very late. Theodore could see all the others waiting for him. He began to feel a little shaky as he got closer and closer. What would the dispatcher say that he had wandered so far from the harbor? But what happened next was the most surprising thing. all the tugs came rushing up to him. "Theodore! Theodore! You're okay!" they all whistled. Theodore couldn't believe it. The dispatcher spoke next. "Theodore," he said softly, "are you okay?" Yes, sir," said Theodore nervously. "Why did you run away?" asked the dispatcher. "Everyone was so angry at me," Theodore began, "that I thought you all didn't love me anymore." "But we do, Theodore," said Emily. "We know you didn't mean to do all those things," said Hank. "We were all worried about you," replied George. "And we're all very sorry for shouting at you," added Emily. "Barrington, too," Hank added quickly. "And I'm very sorry I made you all worried about me," said Theodore. "I promise I'll never run away again." "I'm very happy to hear that, Theodore," said the dispatcher with a smile in his voice. "Now, it's time for you all to go to sleep. Tomorrow is a very busy day." One by one, the tugs all settled into their docks. Now Theodore was feeling much better. He was very happy to know that all of his friends still cared for him. And as he snuggled in for the night, it was at that very moment he knew that he was right back where he belonged, here in the big harbor.